This will be for the con exercise, average rate of change, graphs, and tables. All right, so here we have a table with X values, and these right here are the Y values. And they want us to state over which interval does H have a positive average rate of change. All right, so rate of change, we're basically looking for the slope. All right, so if you remember for the slope, it's going to be change in Y over change in X. So if you have a positive slope, that means either Y and X are both increasing or Y and X are both decreasing, okay? Because if you want to have a positive slope, you have to have a positive change in Y divided by a positive change in X, or a negative divided by a negative. All right, so let's look for this, given the multiple choices, and see which one has a positive slope. All right, now these ranges of values, these are the X values, okay? So we're looking at X going from 2 to 3. Let's see if it's a positive change. From 2 to 3, that means X is increasing, so Y has to be increasing. Let's see. All right, we're going to go from 2 to 3 on the X. So the left column is the X, the right column is the Y. All right, if we go from 2 to 3, that is a positive increase. That's a positive change. And on the Y's, if you go from 0 to 3, that is a positive increase. All right, this right here is the change in X, and this right here is the change in Y. We don't need the actual slope. We just need to specify if it's positive or negative. So right here, this would be positive divided by positive. That's positive. So they both increase, so the slope is positive. Answer A. All right, next question. Here's a table of values again. All right, this is T and this is G of T. So this left-hand column, it's basically the X values, and this column here is the Y values. How do I know that? Well, generally speaking, when you have an equation, it's going to be Y in terms of X, like say Y equals X squared. So T is getting plugged in to here, just like X is getting plugged in here. So I know these are the X values and these are the Y values. Okay, and they want to know the average rate of change over this interval. So average rate of change, it's just the slope. All right, average rate of change is just going to be the slope. And we know the formula for slope is change in Y over change in X. All right, so that's just going to be Y2 minus Y1 over X2 minus X1. All right, we said on the table that the X values are actually represented by the variable T, but those are still the X values. All right, so the slope is going to run from 1 to 3, all right? You can call either one X1 and X2. I'll call this X2, and I'll call this X1. Okay, so in the denominator, it's just going to be 1 minus negative 3. In the denominator, 1 minus negative 3. And now for the Y values, we simply have to look at the table. Okay, this function is called G. All right, so we're basically finding G at T equals 1, and you write that as G of 1 minus, and the other Y value is at negative 3, so that's going to be G of negative 3. Okay, notice I am matching the x values and the y values, okay? If you had reversed these two, then you would reverse these two as well. So we're just finding slope here. It's pretty simple. We actually don't have to plug anything in because we have a table of values. All right, so let's see. G of 1, we look at the x value. We look at the y value where x equals 1. So let's do that. This was the x column. If you go to x equals 1, G of 1 is 0. That's the y coordinate. Okay, so that's 0 minus G of -3. If you go to x equals -3, that's right here, and the respective y value is 6. All right, so we have our change in y in the numerator. In the denominator, this is 2 negatives in a row. It's just 1 plus 3, that's 4. 0 minus 6 is -6, divided by 4. And I think they'll make you reduce the fraction. I'm not sure, but these are both even. So divided by 2, that's -3. Divided by 2, that's +2. So it's -3/2 for the slope. Okay, so we basically did change in y, 0 minus 6. That was your change in y. And we did change in x, 1 minus -3. That's your change in x, 1 minus -3. Okay, this one was in the numerator, and this one here was in the denominator. That's all it is. All right, -3/2 for -3/2. All right, here we have a graph, and they want to know what is the average rate of change of f over the interval from -7 to +2. All right, notice this. These are the x values. It runs from -7 to +2. Average rate of change is slope. So let's take a look. All right, we're basically going to make a secant line. We're looking at the x values first. Here's -7, and you have to go to the graph at x equals -7. That's right here. All right, that's x equals -7 on the graph. And the other one was x equals +2. That's right here. All right, so that's at x equals 2. And we are simply finding the slope between these 2 points. So if I can draw a straight line, let me see if I can do this here. Just like that. Okay, we're finding the slope. So the slope m, we know that's change in y over change in x. Okay, so you can count units or you can subtract. I'm going to subtract. So starting at this point, the first y coordinate is 5. And starting at this point, the first x coordinate is 2. All right, we're going to subtract the other ones. Now going to this point, the y coordinate for this point, if I trace it to the y-axis, that's at -7. So right here, -7. And the x coordinate for this point also happens to be -7. All right, so that's it. 2 negatives in a row make it positive. In the numerator, 5 plus 7 is 12. 2 negatives in a row make it positive. Denominator, 2 plus 7 is 9. Okay, I'm assuming they make you reduce. These are both divisible by 3. 12 divided by 3 is 4. 9 divided by 3 is 3. So that's your slope or your average rate of change. All right, you can't find the slope of a curve because it's always changing. But if you drew this secant line right here, you can find the slope of that line between these 2 points. All right, 4/3 or 4/3. Over which interval does f of x have a positive average rate of change? Okay, we are simply looking for a positive slope. And what does a positive slope look like? Well, that goes up and to the right. Or you can say it goes down and to the left, same thing. But that's what a positive average rate of change is, a positive slope. So we're going to look at these x values. Perhaps we can connect the points and see if we have a positive slope, that's all. All right, -7 to 0. These are x values. -7 to 0. Let's see. On the x-axis, here's -7. Right here. On the x-axis, here's 0. Right here. Connect them. Is that a positive slope? No. So it's not A. Let's try the next one. -7 to +7. Let's try it. All right, on the x, here's -7. Trace it to the graph. On the x, here's +7. Trace it to the graph. Connect them. Is this a positive slope? No, that's 0. Next one, from -3 to 0. All right. X equals -3 hits the graph right here. X equals 0 hits the graph right here. Is this a positive slope? No, that's a negative slope. So it has to be D. Let's make sure. This runs from 0 to 3. All right. X equals 0, trace it to the graph. X equals 3, trace it to the graph. And now connect. Is that a positive slope? Yes. Answer D.